For example, when you do exposure therapy with people who have phobias, agoraphobia is probably the best example. So agoraphobia is a condition where people will become so terrified generally of life that they often literally can't go outside their house. If they go outside their house, their anxiety levels climb to the point where they have a panic attack, which is like the complete disinhibition of the fight or flight system. Very overwhelming experience. People will go out and they'll have a panic attack, and then they'll avoid where they had the panic attack. But then the probability of the panic attack starts to spread so that wherever they go, they have a panic attack, and then they end up stuck at home. And it's quite a common condition. Now, the people who develop that are generally women, and that's because women are more sensitive to anxiety than men. They're generally women who had an over-dependent relationship with their parents, maybe particularly their father. They're generally women who went from their father to a boyfriend who was either overbearing and overprotective, or who was enticed into becoming that by the dependency of the person, of the sufferer. And then, so imagine you're a dependent young woman, you haven't learned to stand on your 2 feet. Every time you had a problem, you were taught to seek authority. You sheltered behind the protective walls that someone else had established for you. You married someone like that. Now he died, or you're getting a divorce, or so that wall is starting to come down. Okay, so all that existential panic starts to rise. You start panicking when you go out, and you end up at home unable to move. Also thinking you're the only person in the world who's suffering that way. And so what you do is you find out, you do a problem analysis, and you find out their core fears. And agoraphobics are often afraid of elevators. And that's quite convenient because, there are elevators everywhere. So you can start having them confront their fear of elevators. So how do you do that? Well, if they're really terrified, you say, well, let's look, why don't you come sit by me and let's look at some pictures of some elevators. And you say, look at the elevator. Okay, now imagine being 20 feet from it. How are you feeling? And they'll tell you. They're nervous, they're afraid they're going to get trapped in the elevator. They're afraid they'll have a heart attack. They're afraid that they'll be in there with other people who are watching them panic and have a heart attack and being humiliated. So the 2 big categories of fears for people are like painful death and then public humiliation. And if you have a really good anxiety fantasy, it's that you're going to undergo a painful death in a very humiliating way. And so that's what they imagine happening in the elevator. So it's not exactly that they're afraid of the elevator, right? They're afraid of death and humiliation. And the elevator is a portal to the realm of death and humiliation. It's like, I'm afraid of an elevator. Okay, how afraid? Could you look at an elevator from 100 yards down the hall? Well, like, if it isn't 100 yards, then 125 yards. Like, you'll find some threshold that the person can tolerate. Okay, so now you're at the threshold where the magnitude of their confidence is precisely matched with the size of the apparent dragon, right? So, and they feel that. It's like there's a place where their fear they'll say, that's close enough.